I'm going to be the energetic speaker. You don't need energy. I have energy. It's okay. If you want to bring some of your energy, that'll be great. Hi, I'm Richard. I came from afar. I'm over in Ontario in Canada. Had an opportunity to come and speak to you about some of the work that we've been doing at Ardell Group. We're a small agency. We're made up of a variety of different disciplines. We've got web designers, developers, UX designers, you got campaign managers, strategists, everything in between. Who here works in a team? Because it feels like we've had a lot of conversations about individuals today. We've got a few teammates here. Okay. So this is very much going to be about, okay, now I've got this group of people around me. Maybe I'm the only person interested in AI, generative AI, LLMs. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I got a couple other interested people. But we have a kind of a variety of different use cases, a variety of different team members, and a variety of different interests in this sort of work. Made up of 30 smart people. Everybody was very drunk on the idea of possibilities of generative AI. We thought, hey, this is great. We can make ourselves more creative. We can be more productive. The challenge was we had no idea what we were doing. So everything was chaos. People were building things, trying things out. There was no discipline in terms of what data was being added into where, who was putting what into each one of these LLMs. There were security concerns and so on. So we decided, hey, we're building things and then we're rebuilding them as soon as the rain washes the mud away. We need to build some bricks. We need to build with bricks and then use those bricks to build out our systems and processes. A couple of our core values are around experimenting and seeing what's possible. But turns out that really just led us down this path of realizing that these LLMs are not in fact magic. There are rules and things that you need to understand about how they operate. Who here is in sales? One person in sales. I'm going to offend you tremendously. And I'm very sorry about what's about to happen. All the rest of you may laugh along for this ride. We gave one of our salespeople access to our ChatGPT Pro subscription. He thought this was great. He works a lot with our strategists, our campaign managers, and our clients. He works in our media division. And he had a challenge from a client that was like, hey, we need to talk to this group of people. He said, great, I'm going to go out and find you where those groups of people happen to be so that we can make a campaign that targets them and speaks to them directly. The title of this is Our Brilliant and Forgetful Intern. So you're going to learn a little bit more about context, this context window that you've been hearing so much about in this room. But really, the title is Breaking Salespeople, play in 4 parts. First part, I call this one Hope. So this is very much, hey, yeah, this is great. I can do this. I need these medical people who happen to work in these states and maybe this city. I forget the states, and maybe this city as well. And I want it in a CSV file with this data. And he goes through and he asks, and he gets something as output. He has to ask again and again. I'm truncating here because the outputs were massive, and this isn't even all the messages that we're about to go through. So take that for what it's worth. You're going to get a snippet of this play. Part 2, we're just going to call frustration. So the list only had a few of these states and a few of these cities. And by the way, I don't want all of them. I just want 200 of them. And I still want them in that CSV file. Also, could you do some medical schools and medical associates? So we're starting to add more things to the list here as we go along. And of course, he's getting very satisfactory answers from our brilliant and helpful intern, very happy to go off and do the work and then come back with a piece of work and say, hey, did I do good, boss? And unfortunately, no, you did not do good. It says I can't find the CSV file. And actually, what the intern's been doing this entire time was actually delivering simulated data, not actual real data of these medical locations. Oh, yeah. The other fun part here is the LM kept telling him it would take it hours to do this work. So he didn't understand the context that really this was just something that it was pulling off of its training data or hallucinating that they would actually take this long. So he kept coming back to ask it how it was coming along for the actual data that it wanted. Then instead of giving it made up data, it was just duplicating addresses and calling them satellite locations and so on. Now we're into anger. Anger is a lot like frustration, but a little bit more questioning his life's decisions, asking for this master file. How's the file coming along? Hey, it's been 6 hours. By the way, this is a multi-day process. I went back through this chat log. There were many different, not just timestamps, but date stamps in here as well. I liked this one. I don't think it can do that. And it didn't, because when he came back, it's like, hey, this still isn't working. And now he doesn't want 200 entries anymore. He wants 600. Last one is just called broken. We could have called this acceptance, really, insofar as he didn't get what he wanted. Why can't you complete this task? What do I need to ask in order to get this thing? Why didn't you do what I asked multiple times? So again, some more questions here. Why didn't you update me? Where's my ETA? It's been over 75 minutes. It's garbage. There you are. Again, my apologies to my friend in the back. I don't know what you sell. Hopefully it's not campaigns to people who want to advertise to medical people in the States. So our core challenge was multifold. We needed to address the quality of those inputs as well as the outputs. And we wanted to stop people from wasting time in developing both or working through the garbage that they were getting out as a result of the garbage they were putting in. We also wanted to address any of those hidden risks around bias and security. You might have heard the chat a little bit earlier from our friend over at Oxford around bias and how that might take form within the data that we're putting out. And then, of course, I mentioned earlier, we have individuals across a variety of different roles from development to design and to strategy. So how do we scale some of this across those different roles and clients in different industries? We have B2B SaaS companies, we have B2C companies, e-commerce companies, and so on, things and tools and tasks that are all very different depending on what it is that we're trying to do. So we decided that we needed two pillars. We needed some training. We needed to teach people what it is that these tools can do and what they can't do. And we needed a resource to help start people off, some place where they could go to, not just for the training exercises, as those were getting built and grown. It's okay. A secret salesperson. All right.
I'm the intern.
Oh, the intern. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the brilliant and forgetful one. And we needed a place to store all of these prompts as we were developing them. So our two-pillar approach, I just went through this part, started with the training. A number of things that you guys have probably heard here today. I found this one the most interesting. We talk a lot about context and memory. Really, our brilliant and forgetful intern, you need to be the memory for that LLM. It's your responsibility to understand what you've given the tool so far and how you've given it to the tool. We've heard a lot about this one as well. One chat for one task. He was, again, our salesperson was asking for multiple things in this one chat and changing things up as he was going along. AI also doesn't know that it's lying. It's just trying to make you very happy. As a probability engine, it was doing what it thought it needed to do next and giving him this list of locations. And then there's the security element I mentioned earlier. We were using a lot of free products and feeding in information that we maybe shouldn't have until we started to get a handle on here are the do's and don'ts of how we should be leveraging sensitive information within these tool sets. Then we've got the library. So before we started building a single template or establishing frameworks, and I'll walk you all through that in a second, we started with one core rule of thumb. Somebody mentioned, again, in an earlier chat this morning, trying to get from nothing to something as quickly as possible. So our governance around this prompt library was really around taxonomy. How can we make it easy for individuals to find what they need based on their role, based on their task, and based on whether or not that particular prompt has been tested and used in production, leveraging any sort of versioning and status labels, et cetera, that can help really narrow down the set as quickly as possible. Then we needed to start with some frameworks. I should have done a framework bingo this morning. So I've heard RICE. I've heard RICE, but with an extra C, which was the Ricky one, right? Which is what my family calls me. So I felt that was a little personalized, even though I have no idea what is the extra C for in Ricky? Because we had Ian with RICE. More C's is better. Okay, that's fine. Similar to the RICE framework, we have this casino framework, and a big credit to Christopher Penn from Trust Insights. If any of you follow Christopher Penn, if you don't, I would highly recommend it. But these are some frameworks that his team developed. And again, in the interest of moving quickly, building something fast that we can work around and build around, we took these three frameworks from Christopher and his team. So the casino one is very similar to RICE. Its job is to output a prompt. So we came from a time when we had very limited deep research prompts that we could leverage. We still do. So we wanted to make sure that we were using non-deep research prompts to build non-deep research queries, rather, to build the prompt for that deep research work. We're also in a state where we want to iterate, improve, and encode the work that we're doing. So that's the Rappel framework, where our job is to then build that into our library and then evaluate and learn from the outputs that we're getting each time. And then no framework would be complete without a one-shot version. So that's our RACE framework, where we have the role, action, context, and then execution steps. So using these three frameworks, we were able to build out a variety of different prompts. This is an example of what we had before. So this is, again, I'm picking on our campaign management team. I work with that team very closely, so it's okay. This is an example of somebody who was doing some reporting for a client and had a bit of data, very light data from a platform, and gave a very simple, hey, I need to give some positive news to a client. Talk about maybe infecting the context a little bit about how their campaign performed. And the LLM was more than happy to oblige with some dates, data, and facts. This is using our Repel framework, exact same loose data set, not a lot of information in that particular data set, but confirming what the LLM actually knows about Pinterest in this particular case as a platform for advertising first, and then using that context and understanding, validating what the training data says about Pinterest, to then go ahead and ask it questions about our data and our performance against that context that it has. So what happened as we went through this process with, again, these 30 individuals? We had a 75% lift in daily AI adoption. And again, I'm talking about going from me singing from the rooftops, hey, we should do something with this, to more than 3/4 of the company using this, leveraging this on a daily basis in their work. Moving from whatever chaos it was our brilliant and forgetful intern was delivering in terms of multi-day, multi-hour to under 10 minutes. Might not sound impressive, but for that one salesperson, getting anything in under 10 minutes is quite an improvement in their work life. We've had zero security incidents. Now, in fairness, we had zero security incidents before this, but that's still one that we were happy to get out ahead of. And we're currently at 65 active prompts in the library. Again, we've got development, we've got campaign management, we've got our project management team is starting to highly leverage the library and using that for their daily tasks. And our campaign management team is using this now for all of their client reporting. I've got a bunch of immeasurables on the right-hand side as well. Again, the idea here is this is our start. You've heard from a lot of people who have been deeply invested in this. You said it yourselves as well, might have been in this world for a very long time. There are a lot of us who have not been in this world for a very long time. We came in towards the tail end of the hype. So our goal here is to start with something, build from that something, and every day, slowly but surely, work and improve on it. We did this in 3 weeks, more or less 2 or 3 of us working a total of 50 hours over the course of that 3 weeks. So I tell you this to paint for you that this is something that can be side of the desk. So some of you, again, highlighted that you do work in teams. You can be the person pushing this forward. You don't have to work with somebody. I think if you can find a stakeholder in your organization that is willing to set aside anywhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of your time each week to be able to work on something like this, is an opportunity for you to show, hey, here's how we can actually improve our overall efficiency and output across the organization from spending these 50 hours of my time. So our first phase was pretty heavy around interviews. So we worked through these stakeholder interviews. I went and talked to developers. Like, this is a content warning. I'm not a developer. I've sat through many developer conversations here so far. I get this much, which is good. It's good. This is why we're here. We're here to learn. So I had to sit down with those developers and talk about their workflows, talk about their gaps, talk about how they were using AI already, if they were, so that I could start to hone in on where there were opportunities to encode and encapsulate that information into this library, documenting those use cases, working on whatever that framework template might be, and then working through that taxonomy and tagging rules. Then I created some initial prompts. Week 2 was all about filling up that library again with those initial prompts. Again, to be clear, and actually I think in that original screenshot, you would have seen all the prompts that were in there were red. As soon as they go into our library, they start off in our first of 2 phases. So if they've gone through any of our prompt optimizing tools, if they've done a gut check with a subject matter expert and they've come out of one of these use cases, they are cleared for being tested in production, but they are still red as they have not actually been tested hard against any client work or client data or internal work and data. As soon as they get tested, they move up in version count and they move out of that red status field into a green status field. We have a 3rd phase for anything that we're archiving as well. I mentioned training as our second pillar. Only after I went through this first phase and a half did we actually draft our training outline and created a feedback loop process that I'll talk about here in a second as well. Then finally, we refined those prompts and frameworks based on that training data, based on running an internal pilot to actually see what people grokked onto and what they wanted from that training, and then iterated on that training process itself based on that feedback. There you go. 3 weeks, 50 hours, more or less. The other parts of making this stick, again, the benefit of working in a group is that you get other people to work with. Despite the giant book that we had up here earlier, there is, in fact, no textbook on how to do this sort of stuff. Not that we're looking to write the textbook, but I do think that the real goal here is that we all continue to learn from each other and improve. So we built some very simple ways to make that happen, whether that's internal conversation points within our Slack channels that we can use, whether that's having some set aside time each week. And again, we're not talking a whole lot of time, an hour and 20 minutes, where we can all come together optionally to talk about the work that we've been doing, the things that we've been experiencing, what we've learned, what we're building. This is what I was referring to earlier. So within that prompt library and framework, we have 2 feedback forms, very simple, can be filled out in less than 2 minutes. Don't need to give a lot of context. The filling out of each one of these forms can trigger a future conversation. So one around actually submitting a new prompt. Hey, I have a use case. It's something I do regularly. It's part of my daily workflow. Here's what I'm using. Here's my suggestion. You don't even have to give me the prompt that you're currently using. You can just tell me about the work and we can go from there. And then there's a prompt feedback and change request form. Hey, I used this prompt in production with this use case. Here's where it fell down. Here's how I think we can improve it. I used it with this model and it sucked with that model, but it worked really well with that model. Here's where we can put this all into our change logs to make sure it's well documented. So how can you get started? I mentioned 50 hours or so, but you can truncate that down to less than that. You could do it in a day if you really wanted. You can work with one engaged teammate, pick apart their brains, their workflow, their pain points. It doesn't have to be everybody in every group. You can start in your group. You can start with your workflow and go from there. I mentioned that we started with 3 different frameworks. You could start with one. Pick the one that makes the most sense given the context of the person that you're doing your stakeholder interview with. You can create a simple MVP library. We ended up using Notion. We're also a Jira shop. We use Confluence for some stuff. A big shout out to Prompt Hub and Dan. We investigated that as an opportunity as well. So there are lots of options out there for getting spun up quickly in this regard. And then you hear about these folks as kind of scapegoats, but if you're the AI enthusiast within your organization, not the person that's talking about doom and gloom replacing everybody, but the person who's saying, hey, this is a really great thing that we can collaborate on together, AI and the human, feel free to start collecting some of these principles from sessions like today or your work online, and even just building out a very basic set of training documentation that you can start to disseminate amongst the rest of the team. We always end with the Lorax. Do we have any Dr. Seuss fans? Yeah, anybody with a kid. Okay, good. Yes, yeah. So Lorax has this saying, we end all of our all hands like this. It's a tradition. I have to put it in my presentation. My boss isn't here. He flew me out here generously, but if he found out that I didn't include this, he would be very angry. So it's not about what it is, it's about what it can become. Really, that's just his opportunity, Dr. Seuss's opportunity to say, you got to start somewhere, figure out what you don't know as you go along. This was our opportunity to do exactly that. And I do hope that for anybody who hasn't taken some of these big, massive steps that we've been talking about today, that this quick talk inspires you to get started in your own organization. Slides are available here. I should have mentioned that at the top.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Yeah.
And thanks for setting the right mood and giving the right energy to this beautiful room.
Yeah.
Beautiful people. Questions, reflections, comments? Any? Yeah. Please say aloud.
Sure. Right, sure. So the 2 questions were, what was the biggest challenge or roadblock in getting it accepted? And then what was our kind of aha moment, I guess? What really led to, oh yeah, we made the right choice in doing it this way. So for us, we've always been a pretty small team. We were one of the first Shopify developers way back in the day. So we're Ottawa-based specifically. And if you're familiar with Shopify, they were an Ottawa-based shop. We were also working with organizations in various other technologies and stuff. Not that we're trying to be all things to all people, but our leadership team, our founder and his team were very excited by the prospect of working collaboratively with AI, both from a client perspective, but then specifically about the internal output that we could have. So we didn't have a lot of resistance. I think the number one thing that I put forward, and I was chatting with a seatmate about this earlier, was our policy. So I think the team at the top was very excited about the possibility of how generative AI could improve our work. The team who's in the day-to-day weeds is, I don't even have time to figure out what it is I'm doing on this particular project. How are you also going to add in this extra task and step? And what does that mean for me? Is it my job to teach the AI how to do my work? So the policy's role was a little HRE and, hey, don't put the sensitive information into the machine and that sort of stuff. But really, it was more of a cultural element. We titled the policy Human plus AI Collaboration. Like we tried to be very clear. The goal here is not to 10x anyone's output and then 10x our profits on your back. It was really to have that opportunity to, when we talk about busy season in our campaign agency world, as we're coming up on the November to December timeframe, I don't want anybody working 80, 60, 70-hour weeks. We have a work-life balance that we need to maintain. How can I have it so that you're working 30 hours instead of that 50-hour week, doing the same output by encapsulating and encoding the work that you're doing here? And that worked. I think that was the turning point for everybody. In terms of when we said, aha, this is actually working, I think it was that adoption rate. So they go part and parcel. When we went from having these individuals who I opened the floor, I said, anybody want to talk to me about how they're using AI currently and what they're doing? And I had, out of 30 people, I had 4, and not even one from each discipline. I think once we came back around to it a few months later, we had some follow-up sessions to understand how people were implementing it, getting some of that tactical data about how it's been used. That was when we started to realize, okay, we're no longer a handful of people in a medium, smallish size organization that are using these tools. We're now more than 0 people or more than 4 people using those tools. The next step then is the daily holdouts. Are they individuals who are reticent about using the tools? Have they not hit the training piece, or have they just not found the steps in their workflow to actually leverage it on a daily basis? Or am I measuring the wrong period of time? I can't say. I collected these a couple of weeks ago specifically for today. But that would be my next step, I think, is really I want to make sure that I can say, hey, everybody in our team uses it in some capacity to help make their work and life better.
Thanks for sharing your progress with
Sure.
prompt libraries. It's a great way to scale out consistency across your organization. The question I have for you is, have you thought about, by creating this library and creating this asset out there, we're now starting to create these assets out there that are owned by the enterprise.
Yep.
We saw a massive change when GPT went from 4.0 to 5. And so there's the model shifting underneath the scenes.
Yeah.
So have you thought about how to contemplate for that? And then also, when you said, I think you had 65 templates out there. So now it's starting, in my head, I'm thinking like, okay, how does the right person find the right template for the right job? So how, like discoverability. And so that's have you thought about how you would solve that as well?
Sure. Yeah, so the one framework I didn't mention, actually, so we started this project, actually it was coming to an end just before GPT-5 came out earlier this year, and I had to add in another item. So I've got a grid within Notion that has those 3 frameworks, and then I've got the GPT-5 cookbook, and I've just sandwiched it in there, because at the time I had no idea really. They'd come out with their own rules, if you want to call it, or guide around prompting. And I said, I don't know if any of these are actually going to work until we actually get in there and test it out and experiment with it. So part of the what survived actual real world application is what's in that library right now. Where did I try it? What were my results in that particular tool? So as it gets submitted, fine, that's all well and good. But then as it gets applied, we expect the team to be coming back and feeding back into that change log, at least the experimentation steps that they went through, tried it in Gemini, tried it in ChatGPT, tried it in Claude, and these models, and here's how it actually performed relative to the expected output or to any previous output. Yeah, foundational, I think, is much like the models. We are trying to be very similar in our approach, regardless of the model output. We can only control what we can control, so our goal is to start somewhere and then iterate as we go. Your second part. Discoverability. Yeah. So I mentioned at the top, that was our number one focus. To your point, no one's going to use this thing if they can't actually find stuff. So we have multiple different methods of discoverability. Notion has its own little search function, fine, so be it. But then we have categories, and our categories are based on job function. And then we have tags within those categories based on the job to be done. So between those 2 elements, we found that we've covered most of the bases. Individuals are reporting that they can find what they need pretty quickly, and if they can't, they know where to go to fill out the request portion for requesting that as a template. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, firstly, apologise for joining your lecture a little bit too late. I've found out about, it's been a journey of discovery for me. I've learned about 6 different frameworks during the course of just one day, which is brilliant. Thinking about my history as a software developer, what tends to happen with frameworks and standards is all the time they normalize, are accepted, and then annually refreshed. They kind of like the first half of it. I guess my main question is, do you feel that might happen with frameworks generally? It's a big question. And also, I may have missed this at the beginning of your talk. When somebody submits a prompt that they've been using, do you have a set of criteria that you apply before it becomes part of your library?
Yeah, good questions. Not a software person. Happy to hear you're not a salesperson. I dug on them a little bit earlier in the presentation, so you missed that. But so the answer is, and it's part of the reason why I think we went with those 3 frameworks to begin with. We found it covered, it's that 80-20 Pareto type rule. As long as we covered 80% of the situations with these as frameworks, people can be flexible within frameworks. Each one of these frameworks are built out in such a way that you can be pretty relaxed and turn them into whatever it is that you need to turn them into. We use them predominantly from a starting point perspective. So when we submit something new, someone has to pick something to start with. It's going to be from one of those frameworks, and then what it eventually turns into is whatever happens in an actual application. And again, I suck at this. This is my, don't ask me anybody to remember your name. It's never going to happen. I can't even remember the name of the sales guy. What was your second question? I'm sorry.
First thing is about standardization of framework.
Yeah.
The second one kind of you partly answered, which was about what criteria do you apply.
Oh, yeah.
Here's a great thing. Let's use that.
Yeah.
Just say, okay, we'll put it in the library for later, or do you apply a sort of checklist of criteria before you do?
Yeah, so we're a small enough company that we just nod our heads and put it in based on what we need to do. So we will use meta prompting to build out the initial prompt based on the frameworks, and then we put it into the library. But again, we have different statuses for the prompts that are in the library. So in order for us to clear it, it needs to go through real world application. There is a rubric that we have. As part of an evaluation form, somebody can go in and literally check off each one of these items in the rubric. I think somebody mentioned earlier, yeah, but how does it actually work in practice? Okay, it exists as a rubric goes, but we're not dealing with thousands or hundreds of people in our organization. We're 30 people. If I had to roll this out more thoroughly, then yes, I would be much more stringent. I would have a specific QA or UAT style approach dealing from your software world to actually go through the process of evaluating the performance. Here it's more, hey, I suggested this thing. I'm going to go ahead and apply it now. I've got some colleagues within my same space who are in that same situation. They're going to go ahead and figure out what their use cases and applications are with it. Did it meet it? Did it not? If it starts to not over a long period of time, or if it starts to not be used or hasn't been updated over a long period of time, we can age it out and put it off on the shelf to reuse in the future if we want to or not. And then it'll go back through that cycle. What's changed? What new models are there? What's changed in the environment? Do we have new frameworks and so on? We haven't gotten through that cycle yet, but I'm sure it's coming.